so much for taking time out of your calendar and stopping by here. We are going to talk about from doing Agile to being Agile, 10 ways and 10 a little bit extra ways of growing your Agile mindset, and that's both for you, for your team, and for your organization in general. So there are 4 things, 4 learning objectives I would like for you to walk away with from here. It is learn and share benefits of being Agile over doing Agile. It's increase your Agile comfort level and understanding. It's being able to identify and share 10+ opportunities for how to grow an Agile mindset for yourself, your team, and your organization. And lastly, something around learn the brain science behind how to get people out of what I call Agile autopilot and into Agile thinking. All right. So before we get started, you should all have some materials. Either you're sitting on them or you've already found them. So you should have a stack of index cards and a pen. And you don't have to use the index cards. If you want to take notes in your own notebook, perfectly fine. Your laptop, perfectly fine too. You will, though. There are a couple of places where you're going to be using the index cards. So just hang on to them. All right, thank you. Okay, so we're going to start there with the cards. So I'll grab a card out of your stack. And just take a minute to reflect on what your Agile comfort level is right now. We'll use a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest. And yeah, just take 10-15 seconds to reflect on that, how you would score yourself right now in this moment in your Agile comfort level. 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest. When you've done that, just raise your hand. All right. And flip that card around, and on the back write the word feedback. Hang on to that card, you will come back to it. So you can stack it in or put it in the back of the stack. All right, thank you. Okay, so before we get started with that, with the getting into the meat of this, I'm just going to take 60 seconds to briefly introduce myself. All right, so my name is Klaus. I am an Agile coach. I work for a company called EPAM. Even though my name sounds Germanic, I am not from Germany. I am from Denmark. This is where I was born, and this is where I went to school, getting my master's in political science. This is where I live today. These are my favorite, there you go. These are my favorite running shoes, and this is my favorite running trail. I don't drink this anymore, but if I could, I would eat this every day. I love the outdoors and photography. Over the years, I've climbed Mount Baker down in the state of Washington, Großglockner in Austria, and Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa. These are some of the cameras I've owned and sold over the years. And to snap some of these photos, this is from Greenland, this is from Africa, and this is from BC. This is the car I drive today, to fit 2 of these in the back. When I get old, or when my kids get old enough to drive themselves, this is the car I would like to drive. I'm a big believer in continuous improvement and servant leadership, or to paraphrase John F. Kennedy, ask not what your team can do for you, ask what you can do for your team. All right, that was a quick introduction about me. All right, so growing your Agile mindset. What is a mindset? So a mindset on the abstract level is a set of assumptions, ideas, methods, behavior that manifests itself in observable behavior, thoughts, actions. Another way to think of this, or maybe an easy way to think of this, is a mindset is more of a sliding scale, where you have sort of 2 endpoints, and along this scale, between these 2 endpoints, you have some observable behaviors and ideas and thoughts. Some examples of mindsets that are perhaps better known is we can take U.S. political mindset. You have one end, you have Republican, the other one you have Democrat. That's some 2 different mindsets, and there are some observable behaviors and actions and thoughts behind those 2 different mindsets. Another example of a mindset is for success, and to have 2 endpoints in this mindset. One is called fixed mindset, that believe that success can be attributed pretty much to your brain and your skills. And on the other end of this scale, we have what's called the growth mindset, which believes that your success can be attributed to your hard work. hence the poor ant. All right, and then lastly, what we're going to talk about tonight is sort of a work product delivery mindset, where we have on one end, we have what we can call a deterministic mindset, and on the other end of the sliding scale, we have what we can then call the Agile mindset. All right, so now it's time to dig back into your index cards, or no, sorry, just take a minute to look at these two, the blue and the red sticky, and see which one sort of describes you best. Just take a minute to read that. Once you've read it. So if the blue describes you best, just raise your hand. If the red describes you best, just raise your hand. Wow. I'm not sure I'm able to teach you very much tonight. All right, that's good, fantastic. All right, so now we're going to get into sort of the characteristics, the observable behavior of having an Agile mindset. And the first one is, the first sort of characteristic, or the first key in there is around reducing waste. So this stems from lean thinking, lean manufacturing thinking, and this can also then be applied to software development, web and software development. And the different types of waste, so there are 8 types of waste we're going to go through. The first one being inventory. So inventory is the waste. Obviously, inventory in manufacturing is, for example, in Toyota, when they produce cars, they will have tires. All their tires are inventory, so they try and reduce their inventory. For example, they don't have tires for the Camry model for the next 20 years. That would be potential waste, because who knows, maybe in 10 years we'll have flying cars. So you don't need that many tires. So to translate into software development, inventory is work you've started but not finished. And we want to reduce that. We can't eliminate it. That doesn't make sense, and it's not feasible. But we want to reduce work we've started and not finished as much as possible. And there are ways we can do that. One of this ties into is what we'll talk about a little bit later, is around flow and limiting work in progress. But we'll get back to that in a couple of slides. All right, the next type of waste is what's called overproduction. And overproduction is when you have, in software development, is when you have too many features, or you want to develop all the features before you release your product. And countless research tells us that customers, they don't use all the features that they develop. They maybe only use up to 50%. So the last 50, that's potential waste. So we want to try and minimize that. Not again, we can't reduce it, but we want to minimize it. We don't want to over-featureize our product. So that's the second type of waste. A third type of waste to look out for and try to reduce and minimize is what's called over-processing. So in manufacturing, that's when you have a product, or a step in a product, and you apply too many processes to this. That's waste, because it's wasteful, you don't need to do that. In software development, over-processing is reinventing the wheel, as in you're not utilizing the current code base or the current classes in there, or also from a people level, you're not utilizing the skills that people have. That's as in, let's say you have a number of Java developers, but the next program or the next product you want to write has to be .NET. That's potential waste, because why can't you do this? Why can't you utilize your current skills that you have on your team? So that's over-processing, reinventing the wheel. That's potentially wasteful. The next type of waste is called transportation. So transportation is pretty simple in manufacturing. That's when you have, let's take the Toyota example again. Let's say we produce the tires for the Camry model here in Vancouver, but it's being assembled in Toronto. So we have to move those tires, physically move them from Vancouver to Toronto, and it's wasteful. Why can't we assemble the car where we produce the tires? So in software development, transportation is what we call handoff. As in, we've now done the requirement, now we hand them off to someone else to approve. And then once they're done with that, they hand them off to someone to start coding, and then we hand them over to someone to start testing. Obviously, there will be some transportation in software development, but we want to reduce this as much as we can. Again, because every time we hand over, there's potential waste there. One of the biggest waste in handover is called waiting. As a project manager, one of the key things that I see a lot is wait time. As in, we have an idea, and then we get that idea down on paper, and then we start writing some requirements for that, and then we hand it over to someone to start approving it, and then they sit on it because they don't have time, they have too much on their plate, so they don't get to it, and then it takes a couple of weeks, and then they finally review it, and then they hand it off to someone else. So there's lots and lots of wait time in software development. We want to try and reduce it as much as we can because it's wasteful. One of the ways to do that, one of the ways to do that is simply start measuring. So if you were to measure from the sort of the time the idea is born over to the time that the idea is, or the final product is in front of the customer, if you were to measure that and look at how much time are we actually working and how much time are we just waiting, my bet is up to 50%, if not more, would be pure wait time. And that's wasteful. We want to try and reduce that. All right, the next type of waste is what's called motion. So motion, again, in manufacturing is when, I'll say I'm at a conveyor belt, I am assembling something, and to do that I need my screwdriver. So my screwdriver is way over here. I go over here and pick it up, go back and assemble it, and I have to go back and put it back in there. If the screwdriver was right here, there would be less motion. There would still be some motion, but it would be less. So in software development context, motion is context switching. As in, we have different tasks we're working on. It could be we're working on typically multiple projects. So every time I have to switch sort of focus from one project to another, it can take up, research shows it takes up to 20 minutes for you to sort of be fully focused again. If you do that a lot during the day, you lose a lot of time, and that's wasteful. So we want to try and reduce that. In an agile mindset, we want to reduce this type of waste. All right, defects. Not a lot to say to that. We want to obviously minimize them as much as possible because it's sort of a do-over. Every time we produce a defect, we have to do that over. So as much as possible, try and reduce that. All right, last type of waste is what's called underutilized people. So that's both in terms of skill set, as in the example before. Let's say we have a lot of Java developers on our team, but the next thing we do has to be in .NET. That's not utilizing your people fully. It's also having people around that you're not fully utilizing their skills. And finally, it's also having people on your team that are not, as just in terms of capacity and time, that they're just sitting around waiting for them to be busy again. That's underutilized people again. So we want to keep people as sort of as sustainably or sort of a steady busyness all throughout. Not too much, not too little, just right, but we don't want these valleys and peaks because that's potentially wasteful. All right, now back to the index cards or your notebook. So I would like you now to make a doodle, a small drawing of the type of waste you see most often in your organization. So here they are again. Take a minute to do that, a small drawing. And the reason we call it a small drawing a doodle is because we're not testing your artistic skills, just simply trying to get, pen to the paper. So take a minute to do that. Once you've done that, turn to your neighbor and share your drawing with them. And just a couple of words of the type of waste you see most often, you come across most often. Pardon me?
What are we supposed to do?
Draw a small drawing or a doodle of the type of waste you come across most often in your organization. So in your day-to-day work, do you see inventory most often as a waste? Do you see overprocessing, overproduction, transportation, waiting? What do you see most often?
So can I just write the word instead? Sorry, I don't.
If you try and draw it out, just a small doodle. There's no right or wrong, and we're not testing artistic skills. If you're really not comfortable, you can write the word out. Once you've done that, just turn to a neighbor and share a couple of words about the type of waste you see most often. Remember, sharing is caring, as my youngest son saying. once you share with your neighbor, just put your hand up. All right, thank you. Okay, so moving on, that was the first sort of observable behavior in an Agile mindset. A second observable behavior or action or thought is the notion of starting with why. We want to know where we're going when we start out. Regardless of what we're doing, whether we're producing a product, whether we're doing an Agile transformation or just a transformation, or why even we're having, what's our business? Why are we doing what we're doing? So starting with why is really, really important. One of the things that it allows us to do when we start with why is we can come up with some quantifiable goals. We can say that, well, for this product, I want to increase our with this product, I want to increase our customer satisfaction by 2% or something like that. Or I want to make $10,000 more than I'm doing today. It has to be the reason, or when we can do that, it allows us to measure whether we're successful or not, or how successful we are. Imagine doing something and spending a lot of money at it and not knowing whether you're successful or not. That's not, that's not a good place to be. So we want to start with why. We want to know what we're doing, why we're doing what we're doing, and we want to come up with some measurable goals. Just a couple of goals, preferably stated in some business terms and something that's measurable. And then measure that. Say that in 6 months we want to see that 2% increase in customer satisfaction, and then go out and measure it again and see how successful you are. So start with why is another key principle. All right, next one is prioritize. So in an Agile mindset, we want to prioritize as well. The reason we want to prioritize is because we want to know what's the next thing we should be working on. What's most important right now. There's some when I do Agile training, I play a game that's called celebrity prioritization. I don't know if any of you have ever played that, but it's basically you have 12 celebrities. You have pictures of 12 celebrities. They're not actually in the room. It's just pictures of them. And they're on a cruise ship. The game is they're on a cruise ship that's sinking, and so you have to save them. These celebrities. It's anything from George Clooney to to Dalai Lama. And so as a team, you have to prioritize. And you have to order them in the order you want to save them in. And to do that, or to better be able to do that, coming up with a simple algorithm of how we're going to order them is really, really helpful. That's sort of a tip of how to become better at prioritizing. As in, it could be women and children first, or it could be good looks, or it could be amount of money, whatever it is, something simple that helps take that subjectivity out, because prioritizing is hard. So if you come up with something simple, a simple logic or simple algorithm, that will make prioritization a little bit easier. The second thing is value, another tip for prioritizing. How can you prioritize something if you don't know the value of it? Same thing, so in this celebrity prioritization game that I play with the teams that I train is, if you don't know who Dalai Lama is or George Clooney, how can you rank him or her against someone else? So before they start ordering and start ranking these celebrities, they discuss as a team, well, who are these people? So the same thing in Agile, we need to know what's the value of our work item, whether it's a story or a bug or whatever it may be. We need to know the value. So that's why we're one of the reasons that we estimate, so we can better say, well, is this larger, is this smaller, what's the value, what should we be doing first? Another thing that makes prioritization really key is that when push comes to shove at the end of a project and you have more scope than you have time, if you have a prioritized list of work items, you can call it a backlog, you can call it whatever you do, but a prioritized list of work items, you know what's most important. So having that conversation about scope negotiation becomes a lot easier when it's prioritized than when it's not prioritized. All right. The next observable behavior in an Agile mindset is Kaizen, which is simply just Japanese. It means continuous improvement. So continuous improvement is really, really key as well. If you were to ask the CEO of Toyota today whether they produce the perfect car, they would say, no, we don't. They can become better at lower emissions, better cup holders, whatever it may be. It could be that the trends are changing for how people drive their cars, or the size of the cups that Starbucks and 7-Eleven now produces, so we need to change the size of the cup holder, whatever it may be. There's always something we can improve, always something we can do better. The key is, though, to build time into your process, into your work, into your everyday for continuous improvement. Because what I observe a lot as a coach and trainer is that the teams become so busy delivering, and this is not just in Agile, this is anything, it's just work in general. People become so busy with their work, with their delivery, that they forget about continuous improvement, about improving what they're doing. So improving is both in terms of process, it's the product, and it's also our team, our people. We want them improving as well. So that's another key element in an Agile mindset. All right, next one is called trust the team. So this stems from sort of two research theories, one called Theory X managers, another one called Theory Y managers. Has anyone ever heard of that? Okay. All right, so now it's time for, I'll explain a little bit more about it afterwards, but now it's time for the index cards again. So grab an index card. There's going to be a series of 3 questions. And one of them will have an X next to it, one of them will have a Y next to it. So just take half a minute to read this inwardly and just put down an X or an Y, depending on which one represents you the best. Any questions? Is that clear? So write down an X or an Y. Okay. Which one represents you best? All right, we'll flip to the next one. Again, just write down the X or the Y, whichever one represents you the best. And the last one. Again, just write down an X or a Y, or a Y. All right, so how many had more X's than Y's? Okay, how many had more Y's than X's? All right, okay, so that's the principle. So theory X, as you can sort of read out of these questions, theory X states that people are generally not very trustworthy, they're not self-motivated, I need to be there, I need to micromanage them, they need direction, they need supervision, so on and so forth. It's something you find, it's something a traditional PM, and this is not pointing fingers because I have been one, a traditional PM likes to do that, or not necessarily likes to do that, but it's sort of built into traditional project management and traditional project delivery. There needs to be a little bit of micromanagement, a little bit of supervision, a little bit of direction, so on and so forth. That's more sort of where that Theory X managers come from. Whereas Theory Y states, sort of takes it and flips it upside down and says that, well, people are generally pretty motivated, they know what they need to do, they may need a little bit of help and direction sometimes and support, that's okay, but they generally know what to do, and they generally have that drive. They don't sit around and not do anything. They're trustworthy, and they can just go over and start working themselves. So for an Agile team to be successul, they obviously need Theory Y managers. They don't need, if they have Theory X managers, then a manager will come to them and say, well, you need to do the sprint this, and this way, or you need to deliver the stories in this, and this order, or in the backlog, someone else than the product owner will come and say, you need to do this, and that. Forget about what the product owner said. Same thing within the team. If the team doesn't trust each other, if they think they're generally not very trustworthy and they generally don't pull their sort of share of the burden, this is not going to work. Agile needs a high trust environment for that to be working. And for that to work, we need managers of Theory Y, and we need to be Theory Y managers ourselves within the team as well. So that's where that comes from, trusting the team. Very, very key. All right. So next, the sort of the 6th observable behavior or thought action within an Agile mindset is what we call flow. So that, again, stems from lean manufacturing and from Toyota, what's called the Toyota production system. And sort of there's this state that we're trying to get to, but it's not really feasible, or at least it's very, very difficult to get to there, but it's called a one-piece flow. So imagine we have a long line of people that are standing at a conveyor belt, and there's always one piece of work wherever you look. Nobody's sitting around idle, there's no bottlenecks, it's just flowing very smoothly. Everyone has something to do. Nobody's waiting, nobody has too much, nobody has too little. That's what's called a one-piece flow. Very, very hard to get to, if not, impossible. So what we want to do then instead is want to look at what's their flow today, like where are bottlenecks, where does work sort of pile up, where do people sit idle typically. So what I see a lot from Agile teams that that do the switch over from working sort of a traditional way of delivering projects to an agile way of delivering projects is that the developers, when we start a sprint, they will say they have 10 stories. So the developers have this mindset, well, I will just start everything at once because that's what I'm used to doing. So they start all 10 stories at once, which means that the testers on the team, they sit around and they have nothing to do. And when they're done with their 10 stories, the developers, they hand them over to the testers and boom, their head goes on fire because they have all this work now. So that's not good flow. A way that we can then get better flow is to what's called limit work in process or progress. It sounds a little counterintuitive that we can actually get more work done by starting less work at one given time. So again, as I'm taking the same example with a team, with an agile team, they have 10 stories. Instead of what I've done with teams is to, okay, let's work on getting a better flow here. I'll, for example, say to them, well, you can't start more than 3 stories at once. So we'll start 3 stories. Once they're done with those, they'll hand them over to the testers, and they'll start testing those. And once they hand them over, they'll pull out the next 3 stories, work on them, and hand them over to the testers. And we get better flow. So that's one way of getting better flow, and which makes for less waste and more productivity within your team. Limited work in progress. And limited work in progress is not easy because it's counterintuitive. It's also some places is looked down upon a little bit. That you come and say, I have this great idea. We can get more work done by doing less work. It doesn't really make sense, and a lot of people are not buying it. But it works. And if you don't take my word for it, you can also read. There's a gentleman called Goldratt, or he was called Goldratt. He's passed away. He wrote a book called The Goal, and that talks about what he called the theory of constraints, which shows that every system has a bottleneck, and for you to get better flow in the system, you need to find where the bottleneck is, and you need to limit your what you call batch size, or essentially work in progress. Great book by him, The Goal. All right, the next principle within an agile mindset is what's called optimize the whole system. So let's imagine that, I'll give an example, let's imagine that in here we're an agile team. And some of you are testers, some of you are developers, some of you are BAs that gather the requirements. And let's say we want to get really, really good at, or we want to deliver our work faster, as in from over here when we get our idea is born, over until we have the final product in front of the customers. How much more effective do you think we would be if we fired all the programmers, which is this row right here, and out you go and we hire the best programmers that we can find all in North America? How much more effective do you think we would be? Like 1%, 2%, something like that? It wouldn't be a whole lot. If from all we're measuring, remember we're measuring all the way from the idea is born over to the product is delivered to the customer. If we fired all the programmers and hired the best programmers that we can get, we wouldn't be a lot more effective. It would be 1 or 2%. But it would become at a great cost because we have to fire them and hire new ones, and competitive rates and so on and so forth. So again, this ties into what we talked earlier around wait time. One of the key areas that you can optimize the whole system is to start eliminating wait time in your system. Simply draw out on a whiteboard, as in where do we have your process, and what's the time, what's the work time for each step in there, and what's the wait time between each step. If you start draw that out, you can start looking at where are my wait times, and you can start cutting those down. One example could be, well, why does it take 2 weeks for someone to approve requirements? Well, maybe it's because it's a spreadsheet with 200 or 300 lines, and they're so busy they don't have time to get to it, and it seems like an insurmountable task. What would happen if you have a smaller set of requirements? They will perhaps get through that quicker, so there would be less wait time. Just one example of how we can eliminate a lot of waste and get better flow and be more productive and so on and so forth. All right, next one is called incremental development. So fairly self-explanatory. In essence, it's the principle that instead of in traditional traditional project delivery, we deliver the product sort of as a layered cake. This is everything we're delivering, but we stack it on top of each other. We have the requirements at the bottom, and maybe some architecture, then we have some coding, some testing, and then out it goes. With incremental development, take this sort of the same cake, but we slice it up vertically. We say, well, what sort of piece makes sense here that perhaps we don't want to, we don't want to put it in front of the external customers. Maybe we just want to release it internally to our engineers or someone else, and they can have a look at it, they can test it, and so on and so forth. So that That's incremental development. We find sort of the smallest increment that still makes sense, and then we add more to that, and more to that, and more to that, and we still end up with the same cake. But along the way, we get feedback. The next one is called embrace change. So essentially, change is good. That is sort of what this notion here says. Change is what makes us better. Change is when there are opportunities rather than risks. As in, when a team has started their work in a sprint, whatever is over in the backlog or the prioritized list of work items, the business folks and product owner can go crazy in that and reprioritize as much as they want. We don't really care because we're started at work. So change is good. Change is what makes us better. Again, sort of the counter example of this is in classic project delivery. They have what they call a change management system. And if you read the PMBOK, which is the book for what's called the PMP certification, they say that this is in place to make change happen more smoothly. But in reality, it's really in place to make change not happen, because it's like bureaucratic, it's red tape, and it's very hard to get around. So in an agile mindset, we sort of turn it upside down and say, no, we embrace change. Change is good. All right, last one is around feedback loops. So feedback again is in essence this is where we get our knowledge, where we get our information, where we get our data. This is what again makes us better. This is where we get opportunities to change because we get feedback. So I would like, now it's time for the index cards again, or a notebook. And I would like for you to draw these 4 circles. You don't have to draw them exactly like that, just 4 circles. And then we're going to talk about feedback. We're going to talk about, this could be any Agile methodology. I'm going to mention Scrum because Scrum is the most popular Agile method, and it has some of these feedbacks built right in. It doesn't mean that in your process, whatever it may be, you can't build these same type of feedback in. It just happens that Scrum out of the box comes with these types of feedback. So in the first circle, you can either draw an arrow or write in the first circle saying, so that's the first type of feedback that we have built into Scrum right out of the box. So it's feedback on our daily work, which happens during our stand-up, our daily Scrum. So we have a chance to get feedback and coordinate the work every single day. That's sort of the first level of feedback in Scrum. The second level, the second circle, is feedback on our product. This is when we finish our work. So the sprint is done. We demo it, we review it, so we get feedback on it. That's the second level of feedback in Scrum. And again, you can build these level of feedback into your own process. The third one is feedback on process. We have our retrospective. Every single sprint, we're done with it, we do our demo, then we do our retrospective. So we get feedback every single iteration, every single sprint. Another way that feedback is built in right out of the box. And lastly, we have our releases. That's feedback from customers. So we try and in Agile in general and Scrum also, we try and release more often than perhaps we would before because it gives us feedback. We're not, that's again, we learn from our customers. There's this I don't know if you're familiar with Lean Startup, but there's this saying in Lean Startup which is that there's no truth within the building. We have to go outside to get the truth of about what we're building. And the only way to get the truth is either to rent customers in to try it or to ship the product and get some feedback from customers. So that's the fourth level of feedback built into Scrum, sort of right out of the box. All right, any questions on this before we move on? We're going to shift gears now and talk about something else. Any questions? Fantastic. Okay, so as I say, we're going to shift gears. We're going to talk about Agile autopilot. I forget. Is it called Airplanes, this movie? Anyone remember this?
Airplane.
Yeah, fantastic movie. This is the autopilot, by the way, in that movie. All right, so I would like everyone to stand up now. We're going to talk about this, our brain. And we're going to talk about it because we all have one. All right, so I would like for you to put up your pinky finger, your little finger, and repeat after me. This is my pinky brain. All right, so this is what's called the reticular activating system. This is your autopilot. It's the size of a pinky finger. That's why I like to call it the pinky brain. So this is what controls your you can put your arm back down. So if you were ever driven when you go to work or when you go to pick up groceries or kids, have you ever driven the same route and you get in your car from work and then you drive home and then you come home and you're like, how did I get here? If you've ever had that experience, that's your pinky brain taking over. It's basically saying to your frontal cortex that, relax, I got this. We've done this so many times before, I will alert you if something happens. That's your brain's autopilot. All right, so hold up your fist and say after me, this is my emotional brain. So this is also what's called a limbic system. This controls your emotion. You can keep your hand up this time. And put your other hand over and say, this is my thinking brain. So this is called the frontal cortex. So this is your pinky brain. Okay, so let's try one more time. This is my pinky brain. This is my emotional brain. And this is my thinking brain. All right, so turn to someone you haven't talked to so far and just go over that one more time, which is repeat it. And once you've done that, just raise your hand and you can have your seat again. Thank you. Thank you for playing along. All right, so also what happened now is that you stood up. You got a little bit more oxygen going, got a little bit more energy going, and we can get through the last third of this presentation. All right, and also I have to throw in sort of a small caveat. This isn't what I'm going to go through now. Has nothing to do with Agile, but as in there's no Agile principles or thoughts or methodologies or anything like that. What it has to do with is how to get people out of that autopilot. So what I see a lot when I coach and train is that after 3 to 6 months, and let's say you have a team that's not doing Agile today, that you go through a transformation, then they start doing Agile, whether it's Scrum, XP, Kanban, Scrumban, whatever your homebrewing methodology you sort of thrown together. It's changed. You go from something and then go over to another one. At the point of change in the first couple of months, 2, 3, 4 months, everything is new, it's either exciting or it's really difficult or a combination depending on which day it is. So your brain pays attention. It's something is new happening. We pay attention. At that 3 to 6 month mark, I see a lot of teams go over into what I call Agile autopilot. Not everyone on the team, but some of them. And what happens then is that you start to go through, again, let's take Scrum because it's the most popular one out there right now. You go through the motions. You go through the motions of stand-up. You go through the motions of demo and retrospective, which, that again. We've done it so many times. Do I have to do it again? And if you ever sat down at a demo and then sort of woken up at the end and said, how do we get through this? Then that's your autopilot kicking in that thing. We've done this so many times before. So I'm going to share some ways where you can get your team out of that, or your team members that have sort of fallen into that rut of autopilot, how to get them out of that and into more agile thinking. Or basically pay attention. Because the brain's hardwired to pay attention to 4 things. It's hardwired to pay attention to more than that, but there are 4 key elements that it's hardwired to pay attention to. So it's index card time again. We're going to do some origami now. Not really hard origami like that. And that's not me, by the way, at all. Someone else much more skillful than me. So take your index card and fold it over once. And fold it over one more. So you get 4 rectangles on your card. And then you can unfold it again. So you have now 4 rectangles on the front, and on the back you have another 4, so you have 8 in total. And we're going to use those now. All right. So in the first rectangle, you decide what's the front, what's the back. In the first rectangle, I would like for you to write the word novelty. So the brain is hardwired to pay attention to something that's new. It happens if we move someplace new, we're all excited. We're like, hey, this is really cool. We haven't been here before. Everything's new and exciting, so on and so forth. Same thing we get, or most people get excited when they buy something new because it's new, it's novel. Our brain is wired to pay attention to that and be excited about that and sort of be pulled out of whatever it was before and like, oh, okay, this is new. Let me pay attention to this. So an example of using this from an agile standpoint could be that Well, in your stand-up, instead of sort of going through the same motions over and over and over again, as in you go around the team in a certain way, counterclockwise or clockwise, whatever it may be, maybe one day bring along a ball and toss it around, saying toss it on one, you go next, and then that person tosses the next one. So it's new. People will pay attention. Obviously, if you do that every single time, it becomes routine, and they go back into, hey, we've done this before. So you have to mix it up. You have to try something new. Not every single time, but once in a while, and people start paying attention. That's just one example of what could be novel. Another one. So in the next rectangle, I would like for you to write the word contrast. So again, our brain is hardwired to pay attention to something that's contrast, as in a dog and a cat sleeping together or cuddling, so to speak. It's contrast, like, hey, what's going on here? Let me pay attention. It's the same thing when something seems out of place. Let's say you're driving home on your route, from work to home, and if something's out of place, as in maybe there's a new sign up, or you see something on the roadside that doesn't make sense. It's contrast. It's like, whoa, let me pay attention to this. I haven't seen this before. Again, our brains are hardwired to pay attention to something that's out of place or sort of misplaced, as in contrast. And again, it could be an example of that. Contrast and novelty something can both be novel and in contrast. That's okay. For example, you could in a demo, instead of having a demo in the same room you usually have it, you can have it someplace else. If it's sunny, you could have it outside, or the retrospective. Probably easier with retrospective. You could have the retrospective outside in a park. There's no saying you can't do that. It doesn't say in the Scrum book you can't have it outside in the sunshine. That's in contrast. People start paying attention, like, oh, okay, this seems out of place. This seems out of order. Let me pay attention now. Could also be inviting other people, other audiences to a demo or anything like that. So anything that's out of contrast. It could be starting your stand-up with a 60-second yoga. That would be in contrast too to what you're used to, and people will start paying attention. All right, next rectangle, I would like for you to write the word personal meaning. So, by the way, I gave this presentation in Calgary 2 weeks ago, and there was not a picture of the Canucks up there. It was of the Calgary Flames. I remember to change it. All right, so personal meaning. People start paying attention when something has personal meaning to you. When something's important, you pay attention. An example from an Agile standpoint is having your team, one of the VPs or the CEOs, depending on the size of your company, come and personally thank every single team member. Shake their hand and say thank you. Then it becomes personal. Then it becomes meaningful to me. That's sort of one way. Then you start paying. It's like, whoa, okay, the VP's here and he's shaking my hand, or she's shaking my hand and saying thank you. Then it becomes personally meaningful. I start paying attention. So that's the personal meaning. We pay attention as well. Last rectangle, positive emotion. In reality, you could just write the word emotion, but we don't really want to use negative emotions in the workplace, so I put positive emotions. So positive emotions is anything that makes you happy, makes you that you feel good about. It could be let's say the retrospective could be just cancel it, to say, okay, this sprint we don't have a retrospective. You can't do that every sprint, but maybe once in a while, you can say we're going to cancel it. We're going to go either to a restaurant or a cafe, or we're going to go to the movie theater together. We're going to go see a play, or we're going to go see a baseball game, or whatever it may be. Something different, something that makes you happy. Building those sort of positive emotions in. Again, your brain starts paying attention when there's something emotionally, and preferably, obviously, positive, not negative emotions. Could also be building. It could also be something as simple as every sprint, every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, depending on sprint length, you go out and have lunch together as a team. Again, it's positive emotions we build in. Something that makes you happy, something that's different. That makes our brains pay attention as well when there's positive emotions. All right. Someone help me with a number between 1 and 6. 5. Thank you. 5. All right. So let's come up with 5 ways that I have built in these 4 ways of making your brain pay attention tonight in my presentation. So what ways have I used novelty? In what ways have I used contrast? In what ways have I built in personal meaning? In what ways have I built in positive emotions into this presentation so far? So that's your 5 things. Yes?
I think in contrast with the fast progression of pictures about your personal presentation, how you introduced yourself.
That's in contrast to what you usually used to see? Yeah? Okay, thank you. That was 1.
Doodling to the novel face.
Pardon me?
Doodling.
All right. That was 2.
Canucks for personal.
Anything else?
Canucks for personal.
Canucks? Building that in? Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Making us stand up and raise our hands in special ways to involve us more. So
Right?
that's a personal meaning maybe, or
It could be a lot of these. It could all be novelty, be contrast. Maybe you're like relieved. It could be positive emotion. Like, oh, thank you. He's making us stand up. I can finally move around a little bit. All right, last one.
There's personal meaning by asking people to find the one issue that connects most deeply for them.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That was 5 ways. All right. So now we're going to move on into reflection. And I see there's 15 minutes left. So I think I'm able to keep the time box, which is a good thing. All right. So now we're going to the card here. The card, you put your 4 squares. Now we're going to turn it over, and there should be 4 new, not squares, rectangles. 4 new rectangles on the back. So I would like for you to just quietly, for yourself, sit, take a minute or 2, and see if you can come up with 4 ways or 4 benefits of being agile over doing agile, or 4 benefits of having an agile mindset. And you have 4 rectangles there, and then so just take a minute or 2 to do that by yourself. Thank you.
Or our work.
Yeah, your own words. Just sort of what are 4 benefits of having an agile mindset? See if you come up with 4 benefits and write down on your index card on the back in those 4 rectangles. And we'll go around the room and see if we can get 4 different ones afterwards. And once you've done that, just put your hand up. Okay, we can take 30 seconds more. All right, just put your hand up, what you've done. Fantastic. All right, so let's see if we can get 4 different benefits of being agile, over doing agile, or 4 benefits of having an agile mindset. Yes?
It's a more positive experience in the development because you embrace change instead of, oops, another change in requirements. It's like, hey, let's go make it better.
Right, good, thank you. Anything else? Let's see if we can get a second one, something different. Yes?
More efficient product pipeline.
Could be, yeah, okay, thank you.
Continuous learning and improvement.
I like that. One more, different one?
Clarity of purpose, so just like reducing the complication of prioritization.
Right, okay, thank you. We can keep going.
I think the biggest benefit that our company has is that the system that we built, we found are the features that the customer really love. Yeah.
Right, okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. All right, now I would like for you to find that index card you started with, your Agile comfort level. And just take 30 seconds and rescore yourself. You know, sort of the you versus you now versus 50 minutes ago. Have you gone up? Have you gone down? Again, scale 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest, and just take 30 seconds to rescore yourself on that Agile comfort level scale. And once you've done that, put your thumb up if you went up, sideways if you stayed the same, and down if you actually went down. I hope there's not too many of them. All right, and just take a minute when you have just keep your hands up, your thumbs up, and just take a minute to look around the room and see how we collectively did. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. All right, so now it's time, that was the thumbs up, thumbs down. All right, now it's time for you to give me the gift of feedback. So on that same card, just rescored yourself. If you flip it over, there should be the word feedback. And there, I would like for you to write down 2 things. The first is, how likely are you to recommend this presentation to a colleague or friend? Again, scale of 1 to 10 being no, no way, never, 10, absolutely, no question. So you can just write down how likely you are to recommend this presentation to a friend. And once you've done that, the second thing is, list out one thing that stood out for you tonight. If you can list one thing that stood out for you tonight. Just take a couple of minutes to write that down. Thank you. All right, and once you're done, if you could please leave the card on the chairs, I will come around and collect them for my own feedback. Thank you. That was it. Thank you so much. So if you want to connect with me, here's my website, email address, Twitter, so on and so forth. LinkedIn, there's only one Klaus Bodeker in Canada, so I should be fairly easy to find. All right, any questions, thoughts, input, feedback?
We've got the room for a while longer, so as long as Klaus is okay to hang around for
Absolutely.
a bit, feel free to hang around and
Yeah.
talk to him.
You're welcome up here if you have any questions as well. No
Just
questions?
wanted to Thank you for bringing
Thank you for having me. All right.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.